lived in Colorado now for 20 years. I've been angel investing for probably 15 of those years, and it's great to start to see some organization around the angel community. I'm going to talk about FG Angels, but I'm going to talk about a bunch of other things as well. So I'm happy to see groups like this coming together. Just a quick show of hands before I jump into this. How many people in the room are or consider themselves to be angel investors? Okay, so a lot of people. Great. Good. Welcome. I'm speaking sort of to everyone, but it's good to know that we've got a nice mix of investors here. So first off, by way of introduction, so I'm Seth from Founder Group. They had threatened to show one of our videos, music videos, and I'm kind of glad you didn't do that. There's a scene where I'm in a sequin dress at the end of one of them. I was thought for sure when Dave mentioned you were going to show something that was it. But so I started Founder Group along with 3 other guys, Brad, Jason, and Ryan, right about 10 years ago. Before that, we all worked together at Mobius Venture Capital. We've now raised 5 funds. We've got about $1.25 billion under management. We have 4 early stage funds. Each of those funds is $232 million. And our 5th fund is a late stage growth fund. We call it Founder Group Select. We basically cherry pick our best deals and put more money into those deals in growth stages. And we're actually in the process of raising another fund to basically expand that growth practice and also do some fund investing. As I mentioned, I've been an angel investor for about 15 years. It's a little tricky when you have a fund because I'm not allowed to invest in really anything that our fund might invest in. And so that means we've got my angel portfolio is pretty random. It's jewelry companies. We own a bunch of supermarket, a couple other things like that, just to sort of stay in the angel deal flow, really mostly to support local deals. And then we've also, my partners and I together have also invested in probably 30 or 40 venture funds. Most of those have been seed stage funds. So through those activities, we have exposure to literally thousands of deals. So that's kind of the background and the perspective that I'm bringing to this. So I'm an institutional investor. I've done some angel investing on the side. And we have exposure to lots of other seed and angel stage deals through our other activities. At one point I would make is, I'm trying to use the word seed and angel sort of interchangeably here. And I'm not really interested in getting into the debate about what's a seed deal versus what's an angel deal. So just assume when I say seed or angel that's what I mean. So we're going to do a bunch of stuff today, and hopefully we'll have time at the end for Q&A. I want to talk about, I want to go through some of the data. I want to talk about what does the angel and seed activity actually look like in Colorado, so I think that's important so we understand sort of from a framework perspective. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk about FG Angels, because that's, I think, one of the reasons that the organizers wanted me to come and talk to you. We ended up doing 66 angel investments through our FG Angel syndicate. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of that, what we learned. I'm going to go through some of the metrics so you can see how much money we raised, how many people participated, things like that. I'm going to talk a little bit about AngelList, sort of more on a meta level and how that's kind of changing and maybe democratizing the capital side of the business. And then I'm going to talk about, then I'm going to have what I like to think of as an honest conversation with you guys about what's working and in large part what's not working about our local angel groups and our local angel investment activity. I should say as well that when I found out I was going to do this, obviously I had all the data that I needed about FG Angels. I went out, I had some opinions about what was going on locally from an angel perspective, and I've been involved in the community for almost 20 years now. But I went out and I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. I wanted to get their perspective because I think the perspective of, it's easy for me to say there's plenty of capital out there and there's easy access to capital. It's another thing, but that doesn't matter, right? No one can figure out what I think about whether there's access to capital or not. I'm sitting on $1 billion. So of course I think there's access to capital. What really matters is what entrepreneurs think. And it's very important to Foundry, my partners and I, that we put entrepreneurs first. We talk about it very explicitly, we think about it all the time, and actually that relates to one of the topics I'm going to talk to about our local angel ecosystem. But I want you to know that these comments, and I'll reinforce this when I get to that section of the presentation, many of those comments came straight from my conversations with entrepreneurs. So I think it's important that we put their lens on what we're doing and make sure we're serving them. I'm a strong believer in the fact that entrepreneurs not just come first, but they are the leaders in any entrepreneurial ecosystem, not capital. Capital follows entrepreneurs. I got that right. You're not getting backwards. So Peter talked about syndication, this sort of notion of collaboration. And so I thought as part of that, we should be explicit about joining the conversation. So those of you that are on Twitter, I think the Wi-Fi is working here. The 2016 ACS is the hashtag for this event. I wanted to call that out. I think it's important that we're able to have that conversation. And then @Sector is my Twitter handle if you want to use that as well. Tweet things at me or tell me something I said is bullshit or full of crap or whatever. My phone is off, so I won't see that until after I'm off the stage. I won't have a chance to do that. But let's have a conversation about it. Like, let me know what you think. Hey, this resonated. Gosh, that didn't sound right. 2016 ACS. All right, so we're going to talk about the data from two perspectives. One's going to be a national perspective, and then I'm going to try to bring it down to a Colorado perspective. I had a lot of trouble pulling the data, which is sort of ironic because one of our FG investments is a company called Mattermark that supposedly aggregates all this data, and then we then followed that investment with an investment from our main fund. And so I called up the CEO, Danielle, and said, hey, I'm not getting the data I need. Unfortunately, we did that on Tuesday, and I didn't have enough time to get them to pull more data for me. So, and anyway, it was hard. It is hard to get data for the local environment. But let's talk about the national environment. This is actually from Mattermark. So those of you that are super observant will notice something about this chart, which is that there's this yellow line, which is the seed angel line, that kind of pops up, starting really in 2011 and then following through 2013. I don't know if there's some athletes in the room, but if you've ever run like a running race, or if you're a cyclist and you've done a cycling race, this is sort of, the analogy is to like your heart rate graph when you're in a race. Like you're all excited when you start and you go out just a little bit fast, and everyone does it, and your heart rate goes up a little bit too much, and then you kind of come back and normalize. And I think that's what we're observing here, right? So one, we should acknowledge that things got a little crazy on the seed and angel side in 2012, 2013, but I think that that's just people getting excited about starting their practice in angel investing. My guess is that this was driven by a couple of key trends. One is there's just a proliferation of companies that are getting started, so there was just more out there, more deal flow. Two is we've had a decent amount of wealth creation in the entrepreneurial set, and I think entrepreneurs almost immediately after they make some money look to then start angel investing. And I think a lot of that happened at a time period that sort of pushed this trend forward. Three is that the cost of starting a business has come down, and so there are a lot of companies that are able to make real progress on not a lot of money, and so that there were sort of more people out there not seeking a Series A, but seeking a Series C or angel. And then, lastly is this sort of normalization process where people just got excited about it, and there's a lot of heat in the market about startups, and people wanted to participate, which I guess makes sense. All right, so let's look at some Colorado data with the massive caveat that these data are estimates only. It was really hard to get accurate data. So the first is the sort of stack bar of the Colorado deal flow by, these are actual funding events, by dollar value invested. And so this small blue line across the bottom, the bottom part of the stack, is the seed and angel, which to some extent looks relatively insignificant, but you need to pair that with, there it goes. No, went too far. There we go. You need to pair that with this graph, which shows the same data, but based on number of deals. And this really goes to the importance of the people in this room and of the angel and seed ecosystem. What we collectively do from an angel and seed perspective is really important. We're a small portion of the dollars that get invested, but we touch a huge portion of the companies, right? Here in 2012, we touched almost half of the companies that were funded that year. These data, I believe, are clean. So I think that's really important, right? That goes to why a robust angel ecosystem is really important for the development of any entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? It takes money. Naval's points that Peter was mentioning are absolutely right. There's a fifth bullet there too, which is that to be a good angel investor, it takes cash, and that cash is important to any entrepreneurial ecosystem. Okay. So I live in Boulder, and what that means, I'm surrounded by people that think Boulder is the center of the universe, certainly the center of the startup universe, and maybe the center of the startup universe nationally. Certainly people believe that locally. But I'm kind of an old Denver guy. I used to live in Denver. I started working, started my career in venture. I lived in Denver. Interestingly, we're in Sturm Hall. I actually worked for Don Sturm, who's a really sweet guy, who's incredibly good to me, way back in the day. So I wanted to look at Denver and Boulder. So this is the Boulder investments, and this is total investments. You see a lot of money goes into Boulder, but it's a little all over the place, right? It's up and down. This is the Denver chart, which I thought was really interesting, which shows that Denver is an increasingly important market, and it's sort of marching up. And we've seen this within our own portfolio, where more and more companies are being started in Denver or have a very large Denver practice. So I put these up a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I want to sort of make fun of the Boulder center of the universe concept. But I actually think it's important that we acknowledge that Boulder is not the center of the startup universe in Colorado. And Denver, in and of itself, is an important venture and investment ecosystem. I should show that chart to Boulder. You guys are probably you already all knew that. Just a little bit of historical context. You can see we've been a pretty consistent venture market in Colorado over the years. Obviously, there's this sort of weird blip here in 99, 2000 that kind of tailed into 2001. But I think for me, the key takeaway of this chart is we've been a very consistent market. And I think that consistency has been good for Colorado. Now, one thing that's a little bit of a challenge for Colorado, and this has just always been that way, is that we don't have a ton of homegrown capital. I did an analysis a couple years ago, and I think that the data are still valid, that something like 85% of the total dollars that go into Colorado companies comes from out-of-state capital sources. I think that's important for you to recognize as an angel investor because it is true that platforms like AngelList are helping democratize and sort of cut down geographical barriers around angel investing. It's also true that the majority of the next round capital, Series A, Series B, Series C, et cetera, is going to come from out-of-state sources. And so I think as an angel investor, we'll get to this in a little bit because I don't think you should be overly focused on where's the next capital, but you should at least have in the back of your mind that the vast majority of capital that comes into Colorado companies comes from sources outside of Colorado. This was an attempt to get seed stage, angel stage investing data. I don't think the data are clean at all. I certainly don't think the number of deals are very clean. But I was trying to sort of pick through this a little bit. Interestingly, if the data are correct here, we sort of hit our peak a little bit before that graph peaked, and that actually concerns me. I'm not sure what's going on. I expected that this graph would map the national graph, because in general, I think what's going on in Colorado is relatively in sync with what's going on in the rest of the country. And as an aside, I should say, I might have said this up, should have said this up front. Foundry invests about a third of our portfolio or dollars in Colorado companies, and 2/3 elsewhere. About half of the elsewhere is in California, and then the rest is sort of scattered around New York, Pacific Northwest, a couple other markets. So I was surprised by this. I want to be, huge asterisk that I'm not totally comfortable with the data, but directionally this suggests that we're not keeping up with the rest of the country as it relates to the angel investing, seed stage investing. All right, so let's talk about FGAs. So there was a weekend in, I guess it was 2012, and AngelList announced this concept of syndicates. And my partners and I had been playing with AngelList a little bit, making some small investments, just to see what the platform was like. And then AngelList came up with this concept of syndicates, and the idea was that you could be a lead investor on AngelList, and you could basically pull a whole bunch of money, almost like a quasi-fund, behind you to invest in businesses. And like I assume a lot of venture capital firms, on Monday we sat down at our typical Monday partner meeting and we said, hey, did you read that thing about what AngelList is doing with syndicates? And we had a whole long conversation about how did this relate to the venture business? Was this disruptive? Was it additive? What did this mean for a firm like Founder Group that invests in Series A and in some cases in C deals? And so we had this whole debate about it. And we got to the end of the debate, we said, you know what, rather than hypothesize about this, why don't we just try it? So we knew, Brad and I both knew Naval, so we called up Naval and said, hey, what would you think if we started an institutionally backed syndicate on AngelList? And of course, Naval said, gosh, I love that idea. And so by Monday afternoon, we had set up FG Angels. And we had decided we'd sort of pick some numbers arbitrarily. The original idea was we were going to invest in 50 companies in 1 year, one deal a week. So I guess 50 companies in just over a year and a couple months. And Founder was going to put $50,000 into each investment, and we would raise whatever we could raise from our syndicate. I'll give you the stats here in a second. But that was the original idea going into it, and it really was just a way for us to play with the platform and see what we thought about it. And so fast forward, this is what our syndication deals look like. So we didn't do one a month, as it turned out. It ended up being about a 2-year period. You can see our max number of deals was 7 in 1 month. And we averaged, certainly well more than a month. There was not a month during which we ran this experiment when we weren't actively investing. So it was a lot of work. The AngelList platform made the process of papering the deal, if you will, relatively easy. And really our work was on the front end, which was finding deals. Now I should say the vast majority of investments we made on the AngelList platform were companies that we identified off of AngelList. I don't think there was one where we were sort of trolling AngelList, found something we were interested in, and reached out. These were investments where we found the company. They may or may not have had an AngelList profile. A lot of companies at that point did. And then we used the platform to process the deal itself. This is actually maybe a side point that's worth mentioning. I say this to entrepreneurs when they're looking to raise capital, whether it's on AngelList or Circle Up or one of the other platforms. It's not a marketing platform. It's it's an aggregation platform and a processing platform, right? So if you're going to be successful raising money, you can't just sort of throw your deal up there and assume people will come to you. You actually have to market. You find your investors, and then you use AngelList, Circle Up, whatever it is, to process the deal. All right. There's a little lag here, so.
They're not the same. Our splitter's not working, so that's what you're controlling right there, the confidence monitor. I just have to keep up with it.
I'll be really deliberate as I push. Okay, so we did 66 deals. Here's the average size of the syndicate investment, which is just under $300K, which is probably right in line with national averages in terms of average angel syndicates. The largest single syndicate investment we made was $785,000. And the total number of investors that participated with us was almost 600 investors. I see at least one in the room, but hopefully there's a few others. This is interesting. So the total individual number of syndicate investments, meaning the number of times someone put down money with us, was 3,700. So we've got a lot of data. There's a lot of activity going on when we were in the middle of our FGA deals, call it experiment. 66 deals is a lot of deals. You can imagine, and this goes, I'll talk about it later, this goes to why we ended up, one of the reasons we ended up stopping it was, even if 5% of those people reach out to you on a weekly basis, it's still a lot of people that you're dealing with, on top of the fact that we run $1 billion plus portfolio with only 4 guys, and it just got to be a big load. All right. So the average number of deals that a syndicate investor participated in was 16. I'm going to talk about this as well later. The diversification is really important if you're building an angel portfolio. And I think one of the mistakes that angels sometimes make is that they concentrate their investments a little bit too closely. And that doesn't mean if you're investing large enough dollar amounts that you can't be helping or shouldn't be helping those portfolio companies. But you need to diversify your investment base because the reality is the mortality of angel investments is really high. The most common number of deals that we participated in was 59. So basically what that suggests is we had a bunch of people that essentially put money in every single deal, or close to every single deal that we did, even though the average was only 16. So the most common number was 59. We had 25 investors participate in over half the deals. Again, goes to the notion of diversification, which I think is really important. And we had the most active syndicate investor, which is the guy that we knew kind of going into it, put over $1 million to work through FG Angels. And of course, we put 66 deals times $50,000. I should probably be able to do that math on the top of my head, but it was $3.5 million, something like that, from our fund into our own syndicate. Yeah, $1 million was our largest investor. And of course, and I know him. He was investing also on the side, so he has a seed portfolio that is several $1 million. Okay, a little bit more data. The total dollars that the companies raised through the syndicate itself. A bunch of them have gone on to raise more money, including 3 who have raised more money from Foundry. This does not include those dollars. This is just money that was raised through the syndicate, is $16.5 million. That made us the most active player on AngelList during the period that we participated, and in fact, we were about 10% of AngelList's total volume in the main years that we were active. These two data points I thought were interesting. The numbers were not all over the place, but they went down as low as about a 2.5 cap, and as high as, I believe, an 8 cap was the highest, but the average was right around $5 million. I share that with you, one, because I think it's an interesting data point, and two, because I think that'll give you some information about sort of the stage deal that we were looking at. Across the market, if the market's defined as everywhere but California, this is pretty much average for what we see, for example, through the Techstars programs that we're really involved in. We had a bunch of price deals in there as well, interestingly about the same number. The price deals that actually had a valuation attached to them, 4.7 million was the average valuation. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. We had about 25% of the investments that we made had at least one female co-founder. A bunch of them had female CEOs. And interestingly, I'm not sure why this is. I mentioned we followed in the main fund on 3 deals. All 3 of them were run by a female CEO. I'm going to talk about something about that later, but I wanted to put that up here as something that's, I think, important. All right, so this is why we did it. We wanted, as I mentioned, we wanted to experiment. We weren't sure what syndicates really meant. It was sort of a synthetic venture fund in some respects, and we wanted the ability to play around with it. I should also say, people invested in the syndicate in 2 different ways. So early on, we just would put deals up, and we had people that followed us on the syndicate. You didn't have to be a syndicate member to invest in the syndicate deal, which is why some of the, for example, the largest deal we had was almost $800,000. A bunch of people coming in just for that one deal off of AngelList. But in later deals, we actually raised these sort of co-investment funds. And so we had people who would put $25,000 into a fund that would invest in our next, let's say, 10 AngelList deals. And that fund became a reasonably significant percentage of the total dollars that were being invested in every deal. We did that because we wanted some certainty for entrepreneurs to say, hey, we have, every deal you get $50,000 from Foundry, you get $150,000 from the fund that is backing us, that we've sort of pre-raised, and then whatever else we raise through the syndicate members themselves. I think individual members participated through those funds because it was a little bit easier from a reporting and tax perspective. For us, we wanted to experiment with, I'm going to talk about what motivates, from my perspective, angel investors. We wanted to experiment with some stuff that was outside of our themes. Peter mentioned we see between 6,000 and 8,000 deals a year, investment opportunities a year at Foundry. So we say no a lot, right? We make probably between 7 and 10 new investments every single year at Foundry. So that's a very low ratio, right? We're investing in a very small portion of the deals that we see. And so we wanted a way to both to say yes to more things, but also to sort of experiment, invest in flyers. Generally speaking, our AngelList investments fell into 3 categories. Category 1 were people that we knew really well, that were starting something that we didn't think was a fit for our fund. Either it was outside of our theme, or we weren't sure if it could reach real capacity, real size, but it was someone we know for a long time and we wanted to back. So that was bucket one. Bucket two were ideas that we thought were really interesting. They were a little bit too early to be a true foundry portfolio company. And Foundry, as a $232 million fund, we look to put in between $10 and $15 million into every single investment, right? Because we have about 25 to 30 deals per fund. So there were a whole group of deals that we were essentially incubating through our FG Angels experiment. That's probably in some respects the most compelling bucket that we were investing in. And then the last one were things that were just total flyers, which is what I'm describing here, completely outside of our themes, something that we wouldn't have even spent time on or looked at as a main fund investment. FG Angels AngelList Syndicate gave us the ability to experiment with those. I want to be explicit about that because I think there's different motivations for different types of investors, and I'm trying to sort of relate to maybe some different ideas that people in this room have for why they're angel investing, to have fun, maybe to make money, maybe to invest in some things they're passionate about, maybe to invest in some things that are total flyers. All of those are great reasons to angel invest, and really map well to, frankly, why we decided to angel invest. And I think part of this came out of the fact that our fund agreement prohibits us from investing in technology businesses really of any kind on the side. And so I think that the four of us really wanted some flexibility, the ability to make some of those investments. And frankly, it was fun to say yes to some companies, including a number of companies that had really struggled to raise money where we saw something that we thought was interesting, and were able to sort of, as soon as Foundry said yes to a deal, lots of other people started piling in. And really, we were the catalyst for those financings to come together, which was great. We're always looking to meet new people and extend our network. I think we did a nice job with that. We also, we really deepened our relationship with AngelList. As I mentioned, Brad and I knew Naval a little bit, but we really became close through this process because, again, we were about 10% of the entire dollar activity on AngelList. And then lastly, and I put this last for a reason, is we wanted to generate economic returns. So obviously, I'm a fiduciary to our investors. We have about 20 investors in Foundry. They're all very large, sort of pension funds, fund of funds, things like that. We obviously can't do anything that doesn't involve generating economic returns. And so we did go into this thinking that we would generate economic returns. I was talking, one of the people I talked to in preparation for speaking to you today was Elizabeth Krause, who's one of the founders of Mergelane. She's a very active angel investor. And she made a comment to me that angel investing is a really hard way to make money. Long time durations, it's a big time commitment. And she, and I'll get to this in a later slide, her comment to me was, you might as well have fun while doing it because it's a hard way to make money. And that's why one of the reasons I put this as last, right? It's the reason to be an angel investor. If reason number one is to generate economic returns, I think you're looking at it completely backwards. I think you need to go into it for other reasons. One of the reasons can be to generate economic returns. It can't be the reason, and I don't think it should be the top reason. All right, so here's some observations, and then this is going to flow into some general observations about angel investing and some specific observations about what I think we can do better with here in Colorado. And then we're going to have some time for Q&A as well. So when you see so many deals, you have to, maybe I hadn't thought about that, the Bible book, but this kind of it dovetails well with the concept of blink and sort of getting to that moment where you sort of got the right gut instinct. But angel investing is a lot about gut, right? And I think that it's important as you think about maybe how to develop your own skills as an angel investor, you need to expose yourself to a lot of different deals. And so one of the things I would encourage you to do in this room is to figure out how you just get in front of a lot of companies, whether that's troll AngelList, make a shadow investment pool on AngelList, by which I mean you pretend to invest in some companies on AngelList, but don't actually do it for a little while, right? I mean, get yourself in front of a lot of businesses, but you've got to do it in a way that's entrepreneur first, right? Which means you can't start calling a bunch of entrepreneurs and asking them to come in for one-on-one pitches if you're still in your learning phase. You need to find places. RBC is a great example of a place, but there's other places to do it as well, where you can go and see pitches, right? You go to Techstars, you go to Boomtown, all the Mergelane, all the other accelerators, and see a bunch of businesses and expose yourself to what's out there. I think that's really important because ultimately angel investing is a lot about gut. right? And just to be clear, I mean, 50K for Foundry is such a small investment. Not that we didn't perform due diligence, but the due diligence you do to invest it, that we did to invest 50K versus our average typical first investment, which is about $4 million into a business. And again, 10 to 15 is the target for the lifetime of a business. Obviously, that due diligence is significantly higher. This was a lot about gut and gut instinct. And I think that's just how it is. Like, you can't analyze, we didn't ask a single company, for example, for their financial forecast. Because what does that mean when you're two people in a PowerPoint or a prototype product, right? That's completely, it's the wrong way to look at business. So a ton about gut. And really reinforce that. Sort of dovetail with angel investing being about gut is it was important for us to be able to move quickly. Now, some of this relates to our own structure and what I just described, 50K for an AngelList investment. It wasn't something that we felt like we could spend a lot of time on. But the experience of making fast investments, we picked a pool of money. It was an amount of money that we were willing to lose if we just completely fucked it up. And we made relatively rapid investments, right? And we spread them out over a decent number of companies. All of those things are things that I would recommend serious angel investors in this room consider. Pick an amount of money that you're willing to lose completely, chop it up into a decent number of pieces, at least 10 if not more, and then make relatively rapid decisions about what's interesting and what's not interesting. This goes to Peter's point about the importance of syndication. We really found that most angel investors were massively unorganized. We're going to talk about this as a problem in our community, because I think it's particularly a problem in our community, and I think we need more groups like RBC and others that are trying to sort of coalesce the people in this room to act together. Most angel investors were totally unorganized, and essentially all of them, and this might have been a little bit of an aberration of our own experiment, were followers, right? We came into a lot of deals that were either early in their fundraising cycle, and then we said yes and it came together immediately, or had tried to raise money for a while, and were getting turned down left and right, and then we said yes, and then people that had turned them down came back in. Very unorganized, and people want to follow, and I think that's antithetical to being a good angel investor. You should have a conviction about a company, whether that's yes or no, and if the answer is no, then you move on. And just because Foundry decides that we want to make an investment doesn't make it a better investment. Or you say yes, and then you go help the company round up the other investors, right? And I feel like too often as angel investors, and this is especially true in Colorado, and this as a good example is something that was backed up for me, or really highlighted for me by entrepreneurs that I spoke to in preparation for this discussion, are kind of on the fence, right? Well, maybe I'll put some money in if you can get more money raised, or if you replace yourself as CEO, if you do this other thing. I don't believe that's how to make an angel investment. It either crosses the threshold, and you're excited about it, and you do everything you can to help them coalesce that syndicate, or the answer is no, and you move on. Too many people are in between and looking for that validation. And just as a reminder, right? So Foundry, we've been very lucky, and our first fund, especially, but just in general, we're considered a very good venture capital firm, one of the better ones certainly for our vintage, and yet we're still wrong 2/3 of the time, right? So it's like the notion that some sort of external validation, Foundry comes in or your buddy comes in, is what makes a deal worth doing versus not doing. It's just wrong, We're wrong all the time. I'm professionally wrong. If we were really good, we bat 300, and we have a 10x fund in our first fund because we batted 300, because we had Fitbit in robotics. So I want to reinforce that. That doesn't mean you're looking at an investment where you've got a good friend who has deep domain knowledge, and you say, hey Jane, could you look at this? What do you think of this? And she gets excited, and you say, okay, great, that makes sense. Let's come into this together, or that's enough validation, that's what I need. You can ask, you can do smart due diligence, but come up with an opinion, and then that's your opinion. The market shouldn't decide your opinion for you, is what I'm saying. And then this is a point I've made a couple times. The reality is, and this is especially true at the angel level, most deals don't work. You should expect, this goes back to pick a pile of money that you're willing to light a match to, and then use that as your angel portfolio. Diversification is really important. Now, we've already seen this in our FG Angel Syndicate. It only takes a couple of interesting deals as an angel investor to return a huge amount of money, right? Just ask David Cohen, who found an Uber investment back in 2010 on AngelList, and he put in, I don't know, $100,000, $200,000, and it's going to return $20 million, $40 million to him. You can do really, now that's a super outlier example, but you can do really, really well in your angel portfolio by only having 1 or 2 deals out of 20 or 30 become successful. Most deals fail, you need to diversify. And I think I've already made this point over and over. I don't think that most angels are approaching the market in the right way. We'll dig a little bit deeper into that in a second. All right, so there has been, for those of you, there's a bunch of people who appear to be at least my age in this room, so you'll remember some of these names. First Tuesday, if that rings a bell from way, way back. But more recently, things like Open Angel Forum and some of the accelerator Techstars merge lanes. Way back with CTech, for example. We've been doing some of this stuff as a market, but I think we need to really get better about how we coalesce this activity, right? Again, I really want to stress what Peter said. Angel investing is about building syndicates, right? It's about relationship building. And I think everyone in this room needs to look to form those types of relationships because you want to go into deals that are fully funded. You want to go into deals with someone who's willing to do a little bit more work on a company. And you want to go into deals with people that you trust, right, that you want to work with. All right, so I've got a bunch of ideas for how we can do better as an ecosystem, but I want to push on this, right, and I hope it's coming across strongly, but not like I'm trying to single anyone out, because I'm not. But I think as an entire ecosystem, and I'll put myself in the middle of that as well, I think we can and should do better, and we need to do better, right? Something like a third of the deals in Colorado by deal count touch an angel investor in any given year, right? And I think that it's so important, so foundational to a robust entrepreneurial ecosystem to have a strong angels investment level. I think it's table stakes these days to a burgeoning entrepreneurial ecosystem such as Colorado, and I think we're going to have to do better if we're going to keep this up. All right, so we're way too scattered. We've got people working in pockets all over the place, and they don't know what other people are doing. We need to do a better job collaborating. We put way too much process in front of companies. And as a caveat, we often, I think we're going away from this, we often, or at least historically, charge companies for the pleasure of presenting to us their desire to raise capital from us. And I think that's absolute bullshit. And I don't want to hear about how you give them help with their presentation or such crap as that. Like that's crap. We shouldn't be charging companies to come and present to us. You're the ones with the money. You're the ones who give help, right? This sort of give first notion that we've been pushing along with Techstars. I think that needs to pervade this ecosystem a whole lot more. I think we're moving away from that, but there are some very high-profile examples still of organizations or individuals who are charging companies to come and present. That's a great example of the antithesis of what I'm talking about, which is you need faster process, we need to be helping entrepreneurs, we need to be giving first, we need to be entrepreneur first. That's really important. Too much process. Related to that is there's too many gatekeepers, right? What we need to figure out, and I think RBC's doing a really good job of this, so I point that out, with the due diligence process and some of the things that they outlined earlier. You need to figure out, this goes to the importance of syndication, right? When you're syndicating a deal with your buddies, everyone can't go super deep on due diligence, right? Someone has to be the point person, right? Everyone can see the pitch. It's not that you should just throw your money in because I said so or because Jim or Julie says so. So you should hear the pitch, but not everyone needs to go deep on a company. You need to figure out a process that allows you to come to quick decisions, that's entrepreneur friendly, and that doesn't involve convincing 30 different people that they should invest in the business. We're not putting entrepreneurs first, I made that point. All right, in general, I think we need more transparency. What does your process look like? Why are you interested in a business? Whenever a company pitches me, I give them basically instantaneous feedback at the end of it, and always if they ask for it, hey, what'd you think? But typically even if they don't ask for it. And say, look, here's what I thought was really interesting. Here are areas that I think you should work on. I never tell an entrepreneur that I think their business is stupid because I don't feel like that's my role, right? My role is to be, we sometimes joke, despite the music videos, that we're the groupies and the entrepreneurs are the rock stars. I feel like my job, even if it's the most ridiculous idea that I've ever heard, is not to say, that's fucking stupid, what are you talking about? It's to say, hey, have you thought about this, this, and this? I'm not interested because I'm not convinced of, and then I can give them a laundry list. That's being, I think, helpful and supportive to entrepreneurs, and ultimately it's their decision to say, okay, gosh, I thought about that, I see your point, right? Or in my case, I oftentimes get to say, hey, you're the 86th business I've seen that's doing this. Here are the things that I think are going to be challenging to rise above the other 85 businesses. I think we need to strive for more and better transparency as an ecosystem. I think we need to do a better job of being out there and being visible. I think that Foundry is a fly swatter for so many investment opportunities, not because there are 8,000 businesses in any given year that frankly shouldn't be funded by Foundry, or that there are other places to go. It's just like we're out there, right? We're waving our hands, we're vlogging, we're speaking at things like this, we're putting out silly videos. We've just become a little bit of flypaper. I think as an ecosystem, and this again goes really to the importance of institutionalizing angel investing and having those groups that organize and coalesce angel investors. I think we need to do a better job, you all need to do a better job of being visible and being out there, right? Work on your networks. This type of forum is great for entrepreneurs, for angel investors, but you also need to go hang out where entrepreneurs are and make sure they know who you are. And again, you're giving before you're getting, and you're mentoring as much as you can, and you're basically putting yourself out there to be more visible. Related is being authentic. I heard this was not my idea, this is something I heard from entrepreneurs. That they felt like there were too many people that they met with in their angel funding process that had an ulterior motive, right? They weren't transparent, they weren't being authentic, there was something else that they wanted, right? Sometimes that culminated in that person asking for advisory shares, or hey, I'll help you raise this round, but I want, X percentage of your company in order to do that. Sometimes it didn't get all the way there, but there was just this undertone of something that was distrustful. This bothers me a lot, and again, this was not in the deck until I talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs and they said, hey, I've really struggled with this. So please avoid the temptation of just sort of blowing this off. Because it comes from the most important source, and might be the most important thing in this sort of laundry list of bullet points that I have up here. We need to do a much better job of not having ulterior motives. This one was interesting. This was Elizabeth again from Merge Lane who mentioned this to me. She said she felt like we did a really bad job of angels mentoring angels, right? And I think that it was a great point. I hadn't really thought about it before, but of course, we talk about mentorship as sort of the cornerstone of entrepreneurial communities, and they certainly are the most important part of any accelerator program. You walk into Techstars, you walk into Boomtown, you walk into Merge Lane, and the first thing they talk about are, here's our mentor network, right? You're an interesting business. How do we hook you up with someone who can be additive and be helpful? We don't really talk about this on the angel investment level, and I think it's really important. I've actually, again, I hadn't thought about this, but after Elizabeth mentioned it to me, I thought a little bit about sort of my own career arc in venture. 8 years ago, I had started a group, we called it Emerge for Emerging VC, and then eventually it became called VC 2.0. And basically it was like a working group of younger, newer venture capitalists, such as myself at the time. And we all got together a couple of times a year, and it was really all about this, right? It was about sort of mentoring each other. And I think about the number of times, even still, a couple really close friends in venture who I'll call and say, hey, I'm dealing with an issue, and I want some advice, right? I've talked to my partners about it, but I just need another perspective, right? And I think that, I think for me, the being mentored and working with a like group of peers was so important as I became a partner at a venture firm. And I think that this is a really important point. Elizabeth, she actually asked me to ask you to reach out to her if you're interested in this. So if you Google Elizabeth Krauss, and merge lane, you'll find her contact information. I love this idea, right? And really this event is in part about that, but I would encourage you, when we're gonna break in a little bit, we're all gonna go back and have some coffee and kind of chat. I would encourage you to be talking to other people, to thinking about like, who are people here that I can work with, not just in a syndication sense, but also people that I can learn from and that I can help out. All right, so I think that this goes back to making relatively quick decisions. I think that there's a tendency sometimes at the angel level to go a little bit too deep, right? This is the, anytime I'm working with a company and they say, oh, well, we're raising our $250,000. Someone asks for the financial plan. And I never say to someone, don't give them the financial plan, but I say, look, we need to get behind why they're asking for that, because the financial plan doesn't mean anything right now. What is it they're trying to understand? They're trying to understand where your costs are going. Well, that's totally valid. Are they really looking for what you think your revenue is going to be in 5 years? That's probably not something that's terribly important. I hate to say it this way, but again, this is something that came from entrepreneurs. $10,000 just isn't a lot of money, right? Someone who's raising $250,000, $10K is not money. And now that doesn't mean it's not okay for you to put $10,000 into a business. My very first angel investment was $10K. And by the way, it was a lot of fucking money, right? I was like, wow, this was a big check. This was back, 15, almost 20 years ago now. And so it's not to say that it can't be a lot of money for you, but you have to understand the context with which you're asking for time from an entrepreneur. From their perspective, 10K is not a lot of money. So you have to be willing to modulate the work that you do based on your role in the syndicate, in the financing. If you're putting in $100,000 and you're the lead syndicate member and you're bringing other people to the table, well, by all means, spend a lot of time. If you heard about something from your buddy and you want to then maybe throw 10K in because it sort of kind of sounds interesting, you can't go then spend 10 hours doing due diligence with the CEO. Because they're not going to say no, because most of them are too polite to, but they feel like you're wasting their time. And that's where this comment came from. Again, from entrepreneurs. We already talked about this. Pick a pile of money that you're willing to light a match to, and that's your angel investment portfolio. Diversify across a bunch of investments. And then most importantly, you might as well have fun doing it. To Elizabeth's point, it's a really hard way to make money, so it might as well be enjoyed. And then two more points, and they're related. You need to be careful about this concept, right? You're not the market, right? You're wealthier than the market, than the average market. You're probably lighter than the average market. By angel investment standards, you're probably more male than the average market. Again, by sort of typical demographics. You've got to be careful not to put yourself in the position of a consumer and say, I would never buy this, therefore this is a bad idea. Right? You have to look beyond that and go find people that really are the market and determine whether or not there's a real market there. This is a really important point, and I heard this from basically every woman I spoke to who was an angel investor, or excuse me, was an entrepreneur that had run around looking for angel money. We suck at this. We suck and I didn't want to admit it either, and I was all proud of like, hey, a quarter of our investments through FG Angels, and a lot of our investments, I should actually come up with the number, but something close to 20% of our fund investments are also in female entrepreneurs, and probably in that same time period, it matches exactly. So I thought, okay, well, we're doing a pretty good job of this. I heard this, again, from every single female entrepreneur that I spoke to. Each of them said that we were very bad at supporting women in diversity. I think this relates to the last problem, which is that we think of the market, angel investors tend to think of the market through their own lens, and most angel investors tend to be slightly older, wealthier, white males. And so I think that was part of the problem. I think in general, we're not giving all sorts of different parts of the market that have unique insight credit for that insight, and I think that this is one of the ways that that's coming out. One of the things I always like to do when I'm looking at a deal for the very first time is I always ask people for sort of the backstory. And I'm looking for what is that aha moment that made them come to the realization that the market was missing something. And I'm trying to also gauge what's their passion for solving it. What I'm not looking for is a bunch of HBS business students who analytically went after a market and said, hey, here's somewhere we can make money. What I am looking for is someone who says, this was fucked up and I'm gonna go and fix it. And they feel passionate about it. Now, this relates to that a little bit, right? I think we need to do better at giving credit and really listening harder for those people that have a particular market insight based on their background and experiences, and I think we're not doing that, and it's reflected in the comments I'm hearing from women and from other minorities who feel like they're not being listened to right and properly by us, the angel community. Quick advertisement for Pledge 1%, then we'll get to some Q&A. Pledge 1% is an organization that I started with Ryan Martins from Rally, Mark Benioff from Salesforce, Scott Farquhar from Atlassian, and a couple other people. Basically, we're encouraging companies to give 1% of their equity back to local charities. Foundry is a member we've been participating in this program since its inception. Already locally, we've generated about $3 million worth of proceeds back to local charities. Super, super important. We build our businesses in the communities in which we live. I think we have a responsibility as citizens, as entrepreneurs, to help give back. I'm happy to tell you more about that if you want to either come up to me later or send an email. I put this slideshow up on slideshow. Actually, I didn't. Micah, who also built the slideshow, put it up on slideshow. If you want to take a picture of this, it didn't come out very well, but I'll make sure I tweet this out. But you can find it up there. In fact, what I'll probably do, my blog is sethlevine.com. I'll put it up there if you're interested in either sharing it with someone that wasn't able to be here, or you want to react to it, whatever. All right, that's my email. That's my Twitter. If you want to reach me, please, I encourage feedback. I'd love to hear what you think about this. And with that, we have 8 minutes and 35 seconds for Q&A for anyone who has it. And I think we've got a couple mics. Questions?
Hi, I'm Jesse Lawrence, Bouldermans. So I was curious to see, I was hoping to see a little bit on your success as well, in terms of how you felt the metrics of success work for you guys, or didn't work.
Do you mean specific to FG Angels?
Yeah.
It's just too early, right? So we've had, so we have 66 investments. We have about 10 that have failed. We've written them to zero, they're done. We have about 10 that have gone on to raise more money, including 3 that raised more money from Foundry. And that total dollar raised is in the sort of $30 million range now across all 10. And so the rest of them are either still working on the money that they had already raised, or are sort of otherwise too early. We've got a couple that are profitable in there. So it's a little bit too early. I think the metrics suggest that if you had invested in all 66, and again, it's so easy to point to the paper value. If you had invested in all 66, you've done quite well. You've got a couple X on paper. We'll see when companies exit. Obviously, the average time to exit for a venture deal, which is Series A to exit, is 7, almost 8 years now. So from a seed deal, we're talking probably 10 plus years. So it'll be a while before we can definitively say, hey, we absolutely made money on these 66 deals, or we're not. And by the way, I should point out, we may do a few more AngelList deals. We just, the pace of doing a couple a month just got too much. So that's what I said it was.
Do you mind if I have a follow-up?
Sure.
So I was also curious about how much effort you have to keep going through, even to this day, to support your FG Angel syndication.
Yeah, it's a decent amount. I mean, part of what ends up happening is when the tag is Foundry Group and there's a bunch of other angel investors, we still get the first phone call. And so, that's part of what happened was that it just became a lot. I would say that I talk to or email with someone from the AngelList portfolio 5 times a week, at least. And it's, I try to, call them on a drive or things like that, but it's become a real amount of time. Yes?
Great presentations. Only a small percent of the accredited investors actually do angel investing.
Let's say it again.
Less than 5% of the people who can do angel investing actually invest in seed stage. How do we get more people interested in angel investing?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things we can do. One is that I actually like the platform idea. It's really easy to go on AngelList and just play around with a little money, right? I mean, in some respects, it's too easy, right? You start, I had this problem, you start clicking and all of a sudden you've spent, 50 grand after you, hit a click button a couple times. So you got to be careful with that, but it's really easy to experiment with it. I also think that it's really important that we coalesce into some groups more in Colorado. So I would encourage people that are interested in it but haven't quite taken that first step. And the way you can tell is, for those people that raised their hands and said, hey, I'm an angel investor, but haven't made one investment, you're not quite an angel investor yet, right? You're angel curious, right? Something like that. So, I would encourage you to go to some of these events, to go to Techstars, to go to Boomtown, and like I said, expose yourself to a lot of potential ideas, and then go get excited about something. Pick an amount of money that you're willing to light on fire, and go play around with it.
Hi, my name is Richard Sudik from Techos Angels up here in the back.
Okay, good, okay.
And I just want to agree with you. I've been an angel investor since 2000, part of Techos Angels, and we often think this is about the angels. It's not. It's about the entrepreneurs. What you said about understanding the market. We're a bunch of old white guys mostly in Techos Angels, and we don't understand the 20-somethings. And so bringing entrepreneurs in, not charging them, helping them, I think is really important. 25% of our entrepreneurs are women. We're trying to raise that. So I just agree on the diversity and agree on the fact that our customers, the entrepreneurs, we need more speed. We always struggle with speed in Techos Angels because we're 300 members. So we've done things to cut the time down. And remembering the customers, the entrepreneur, I think I just completely agree with you. Just as a mention that we've seen the same types of problems.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. Customers are the entrepreneurs. I think that's the right way to approach it. Back over here.
I'm Vivek. I'm the
Over here.
entrepreneur today.
I don't think your mic's on.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Vivek. I'm one of the entrepreneurs here. Angel groups and micro VCs. Do you see them collaborating in syndications?
No, and they could collaborate more. I think that there's been, I think that it's interesting because a lot of the micro VCs started as angel investors and sort of moved up into the VC world. I think they think of themselves as institutional capital and they don't do a great job of collaborating with angels. Now, I think that the main reason that they don't is that they need well-organized, this is a great example of a well-organized group, Techos Angels. They need well-organized syndicate members, and I think there needs to be that level of trust, right? I think one of the challenges when you're dealing with a syndicate that has a lot of individual investors is the idea that you've got to go herd a lot of cats, right, to use a cliche. And I think that's why many institutions, even though they're seed institutions, shy away from investing alongside a large number of angels. They tend to gravitate maybe towards a couple of very wealthy angels who put in who try to act like them. I think that's a great point. I think we could do a better job of that. And by the way, there are a lot of groups in Colorado that I would consider to be essentially, micro funds, right? We're going to hear from David Gold tomorrow. Access essentially at $32 million is a small VC, right? They do a lot of seed stage deals. There are others, Blue Note, High Country, others that are in Colorado at that level that I think would be great syndicate partners for you to build relationships with. But they've got to have that level of trust. Because the reality is, and this is certainly true in our background, we've all been burned by some angels that aren't sort of playing, that play the game for themselves and aren't being company favorable, right? And we've all had some bad experiences with that. I think that's why micro VCs tend to shy away from individuals and look for more of the well-organized groups. Back over there.
Hi, I'm Steve Weidler. I'm an attorney who works with a lot of entrepreneurs. And the question I always have is a lot of entrepreneurs come to me with a lot of different business plans. And I always worry about coming to someone like you too early because it might poison the well, so to speak, because they just don't have their act together to the point where you might actually be turned off by them because they're so early stage. And so I guess the question is, what is a good when and what is a good time to come to you?
Yeah, so I think it's so important to have a crisp, clear version of the problem and why it's important, right? I think if you've got to that point, I think it's fine to go then reach out to a venture source, understanding that, again, in Founders' case, less than 1/10 of 1% of the things that we see we end up investing in. So like the expected answer ultimately ends up being no. The reality is, though, a number of our investments are companies that we saw, gave some feedback to, They were clearly not ready for institutional venture capital, but went and raised an angel round, and we stayed close with, and they kept me updated. And we, 6 months later or a year and a half later, ended up making an investment. So, the time investment is worth it. And basically, everyone who sends me a thoughtful email, I will send a thoughtful email back within some period of time. One more question. Okay, we're out of time. One more question up top.
Yes, so thank you. So I really appreciate you bringing up the concept of the diversity again as far as females and males in the marketplace. I think it's just important to get in the dialogue. And I think one of the interesting things when you first put up that number of 25% had female co-founders, when you recognize that it's likely that most of those companies didn't have one single co-founder, that also puts it sort of in a different light. But I'm just interested in your thoughts on really digging more deeply into why that is the fact. Because I know that many in the room are thinking, well, it's because there are fewer female entrepreneurs that are jumping in the box. And many are thinking there are fewer female entrepreneurs that should be funded. But I heard a very interesting, this was even 8 years ago on NPR. They had gone around and looked at the CEOs of major Fortune 500 companies that were females. And one of the things that they pointed out that they had done to allow themselves to get to that point was to be able to make their male counterparts feel more comfortable. And I think it's a very interesting point, and I'm just, interested in your thoughts of what you really think the reasons are, and very transparent, brass tacks. And B, if you think that the concept that I just brought up has anything to do with it.
Yeah, so a couple things. So first is the actual percentage, so if you think about entrepreneurship broadly, and the world we live in, that's the tiny slice of entrepreneurship. I mean entrepreneurship of all types, people starting businesses. The SBA says that there are more women starting businesses than men. Right, so there are just simply more female entrepreneurs than male entrepreneurs, which probably makes the point that you're making even more strongly, right? This is not a question of not having lots of women starting businesses. This has to do with, I think, two things. One is that I think, I do believe there are fewer women who are seeking out capital sources in the way that men are, right? And I think that that's something that we can help with through mentorship and advising, things like that. And then two, which I think is, and these are not necessarily equal parts of the problem, I think the bigger problem is what I'm about to say, is that I don't think as an industry we're listening very well to women who are in pitches. There's been a bunch of studies that have looked at both the words that are used as well as the way that people approach. In this case, not just female diversity, but diversity of all types, that investors are less open to hearing about ideas from people that aren't more like them, right? And this is the point I'm really trying to underscore, that at least we can control a little bit, which is we can do a much better job of actually listening in. Merge-Lane, as an example, is an accelerator program that I've been super involved with, and I talked about Elizabeth a bunch of times. I referenced her because I value her opinion a lot. She and I talk a lot. That's a program that we started specifically to encourage female-founded businesses. Two things about Merge-Lane. One is that we feel like our business plan should be bunk in a few years. If we're successful, there won't be any need for that. But two, and most importantly, is that we felt like right now there was a need, right? So interestingly, I started a hackathon at my college. I went to a small school in the Midwest. And we ran it for a number of years. This last year was year 4, and I was working with the EIR that we hired, who also happens to be a female. And we were trying to figure out, how do we encourage more diversity? And so we did a bunch of polling around campus. And the number one reason that women participated in the hackathon is because they were asked, right? And the number one reason that they didn't participate in the hackathon was because they weren't asked. So this year, we asked a whole bunch of women to participate, and guess what? We had 53% of the participants female. We also had almost 10% of the campus participate in the hackathon, which is pretty remarkable for a liberal arts college. I don't know how. I bring that up because I think it's somewhat responsive to the question. It never occurred to me. It absolutely never occurred to me. It really never occurred to me to even ask, hey, why? I asked Kate, the EIR, why don't we have more women participating in the hackathon? Our school is almost 60% female. we should, like, that's what the hackathon community should look like. It didn't occur to me, but thankfully it occurred to her, to then go ask a bunch of women, hey, why did you participate and why didn't you participate? And that was the single reason. And literally, by simply fixing that reason, we totally changed the demographic. We literally went from like 20% female participation last year to, it just ended a couple weeks ago, to over 50% this year, which was great. There's one more question. I know we're out of time, but I'm up here, I'm gonna keep going. This is the last question though, but I do already have the mic, so.
Thank you. My name is Danielle Gonzalez, and I'm an entrepreneur. And this is actually my first opportunity to be in front of angel investors. And what I would like to know, as both a female and a minority, is what do I need to do to be at the front and center of every angel investor in Colorado? What do I need to do to get my business on that list and get that attention?
Yeah, so first of all, after everything we've just talked about, hopefully people will come and talk to you, because I think there's
Yes, please do.
this sort of unique perspective. I mean, the whole point of building a business is to have a unique opinion about some part of the market that you are more qualified than anyone else to go after. And I actually made an investment so a couple years ago I started thinking about this, and I was thinking about, so I'm this like middle-aged white dude. And most of the people I know in venture capital are middle-aged white dudes. There's a whole other problem we can talk about later, or in another forum. And I actually started thinking, like, so what are we missing? And I sort of put out the word to a bunch of friends in the venture community, like, I'm looking for some probably younger female entrepreneurs that are building something that relates to, that's being sold to women. Because my guess is there aren't a lot of middle-aged white dudes that can either relate to that or that are thinking of that. And that actually led to a couple of different investments. One was Nix Hydra, which is the immediate investment that came out of that, which is a company run by 2 women that is making games for young women, which has been super successful, which is great. Again, because they had a unique perspective in the marketplace. The other one is Revelar, which is a local company that's making a safety device, also generally targeted at younger women, although the demographic they're going after is potentially larger. I tell that story because I want to be explicit about, thinking about the biases that we have, and good investing is about acknowledging the biases and figuring out where there are gaps in the market. And in my mind, there are gaps in the market. Again, we have a $200 million fund, these need to be really big gaps. So not every business qualifies, but I thought there were gaps in the market because basically everyone who's a venture capitalist is some version of me, right? A diversity in venture capital is like, hey, I'm left-handed, that's diversity, right? And so I think that there is a real thesis around thinking about not what do you know about those areas that you don't know about, but acknowledge what you don't know, and go seek out people who might have a different perspective on that. At least learn about it, right? I think that's important. Now, my real advice is that it has nothing to do with you being a minority of any kind, which is what investors are looking for is a strong statement of problem and a passion around fixing whatever that problem is in a large market. So the reality is, the real advice to any of the entrepreneurs who are in this market, in this audience, is find something to do that you're super passionate about it and go show that passion, right? And then find that 1 in 10 people, whoever it is, whatever percentage it is, that recognize at least the passion. Maybe they don't recognize the market segment that you're going after, but they recognize the passion and they want to dig into it a little bit more deeply. All right, now we really are out of time.